Welcome to Skin Sync, the official podcast of Elevate-Derm Alliance, your trusted source for the latest in dermatology. Join our hosts for real clinician perspectives and expert guest insights as they explore everyday dermatology topics with practical takeaways. Stay informed with up-to-date clinical information and discover strategies to improve practice flow and efficiency. Please note, this podcast is for informational purposes only and not a substitute for professional medical advice. Always consult a licensed healthcare provider before making medical decisions. Clinicians must rely on their own judgment and training in all patient care situations.
This is Shanna Maria T.
And this is Bucci Nita.
Welcome to the Skin Sync podcast. So Bucci, let's get started with something that neither of us ever learned in PA school.
Right.
Let's talk about bedside manner. So this is a subject that is so critical to our success, believe it or not, as a provider, but yet it is never taught. This is something that all patients are going to have an impression about us and about how competent we are, sometimes within those first few seconds that they meet us. How do we start off making a good impression?
Yeah, so I think this is, just like you said, it's really important. I think a lot of us coming out of school, we are so focused on getting the diagnosis right or coming up with the right treatment plan, we forget one of the most critical parts of that encounter is really, how does the patient feel about you? How did you introduce yourself? What are you doing to ensure that they trust you? I think one of the most important things when you're initiating that encounter is really your body language. When you walk in that room, are you introducing yourself? Is there a smile on your face? You want that patient to feel comfortable from the first encounter.
Absolutely. So when you walk in the room, do you say, are you a good morning, or are you a nice to meet you, nice to see you? How do you typically start that encounter?
So usually it's a good morning, good afternoon. If I'm running behind, which I often do, I will maybe give them a quick, thank you for being patient today. And we kind of dive right in at that point. I introduce myself. I ask them for, a pronunciation of their name if it's something I can't quite get right.
Yeah, sure.
And we get started.
I'm a handshaker. Do you shake hands?
I don't shake hands anymore.
No. Do you at least lay hands upon? Do you touch a shoulder?
Definitely during the encounter, not during the first meeting for me, but definitely a lot of eye contact.
Yes.
I sit down as soon as I, wash my hands or sanitize, I'll sit right down face to face with the patient, making that eye contact. I think that's been one of the biggest changes for me that really improve that patient encounter is
Absolutely.
that direct eye contact and sitting down. So they recognize that you're not rushing, that you're not seemingly impatient. I think that's really important.
So you touched on such an important point. Sitting down gives the impression that we are there for them.
Absolutely.
And we have time.
Yep.
We are not in a hurry. We are not going to jump right in to start their examination.
Right.
Providers often forget that this patient is feeling incredibly vulnerable.
Yep.
They are often sitting in a cold room, usually naked, sometimes with a gown on.
Yep.
And they're coming to you with something that they're incredibly worried about.
Right.
So if we do immediately dive right in and start ripping their gown off and start looking at them without making that first contact, that can seem incredibly scary.
Absolutely.
And intimidating. You brought up a great point about the eye contact and then sitting. When you sit, I often, because I'm very tall, I'm 6'1", I can be somewhat of a intimidating presence as I walk in the room. I immediately sit and intentionally put the patient at a higher level
Absolutely.
than where I am sitting. And that is to give them even the illusion of an advantage, but that way I am now at their, at their will.
Absolutely.
I am able to be, a helper to them.
There's actually evidence showing that if you are standing and kind of looking over a patient, it can often be perceived as condescending or, that they're kind of lesser than you. So I think sitting down, like you said, at either eye level or lower, then that's really, really important. And, another thing, that vulnerability piece, I think is really important because these patients, not only are they nervous about this visit oftentimes, but they've waited maybe weeks to months to see you. They've, had to get referrals and take time off of work and possibly travel long distances. So I think it's really, really important that you recognize that it's not just a chance encounter for them. It's really something that they've prepped for, prepared for, been nervous about for weeks. And so we need to take that into account.
Absolutely. So as I sit, I often will kind of review their chief complaints. Usually my medical assistant has had the chance to take that history and pick out specific spots, even if they're just here for their full body skin examination, their 6-month follow-up, their 1-year full body skin exam. I'm just going to ask them one more time. Okay. Are there any specific spots that
Absolutely.
you're really worried about? Or is there any one specific thing that you really wanted to make sure that we accomplished today? And then we dive in
Yep.
into the exam.
I think if they recognize that yes, my MA took the history, but I'm still going to ask again.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes they'll open up to you more than they will your MA.
How many times do your MAs like roll their eyes like, I swear I asked them, and then as soon as you walk in, they had a list and they bring out their map of their body with all the little red spots on it,
Yeah, no, I think it's important to repeat those questions again, and it might be a 1 minute history taking session, but it just gives you that time to sit down, face them directly, and kind of get into it, get them comfortable.
Absolutely. So then we kind of dive into the exam. Do you do the exam the exact same way every single time, every single patient?
I think for me, it's really important to do it that way. Sometimes patients kind of throw you off a little bit, but I try to be pretty meticulous about my exam. I try to go from scalp to toe each time. But again, I'm very cautious about, how I approach that patient. If they seem a bit more anxious or nervous, I'm going to maybe ask permission before I expose an area that they want, evaluated. I might, just ask a question before I look behind their undergarments. I might just be more cautious about their comfort level.
Of course, of course. I do kind of a similar technique with my exam start. And I say, I'm going to start at the top and we're going to work our way down to the toes, so top to toes. And as I start to, move their hair around, sometimes I will, oftentimes ask permission, especially if I know that there are braids, there are extensions, there's maybe a hairpiece in place with some of our older gentlemen. So you have to approach that with a little bit of caution, sometimes a little bit of humor, sometimes making them feel a little bit more comfortable, going in. I said, I'm going to dive right in here and start looking around, and that oftentimes will set the tone for the exam. Of course, making sure if we're wearing gloves or if you had just sanitized your hands. I think that's a provider preference. I think some people wear gloves every single exam, every time. Some people like that touch point.
The touch is really important for me. And I think it really helps build that connection between you and the patient. So unless it's something where I'm concerned about it being potentially infectious, I really think that touch is important. And even if there's nothing that I find and they have a perfect skin exam, I close out that visit with a nice touch on the shoulder or a pat on the forearm. Just so they know that, I'm here with you. I'm taking care of you. I want to make sure that you feel comfortable with me. I will always end the visit with, are there any questions or any concerns, anything that we did not address today?
So you're giving them one more opportunity.
Absolutely.
To dive into their, hair loss concern that will then take them 30 minutes to give you the history on.
This is true. And there's ways to go around that, right? So let's say it is a hair loss patient. I kind of preface it by saying, I am very meticulous when it comes to hair loss. I like to do a very thorough history. I like to do lab work. So it's really important to me that you come back. We schedule some time away, from this visit to really sit down and get into the nitty gritty of this, because I definitely don't want to undercut that visit. I want to make sure that I get a proper evaluation, but I don't have time to do a 30-minute hair visit right now. I think that patients always appreciate and respect that, and they pretty much always come back.
Of course. Well, because they want that time with you. They want that time to really kind of have you look into this major concern of theirs and spend time going through, what they've been dealing with. So I think that's a great piece of advice for new providers is don't feel like you have to rush through that one very important piece of it. Make sure that the patient understands that this is important to you as well, and you would like to spend some time with them.
Absolutely.
Some dedicated time later. What are some other, just ways of making that patient feel comfortable and feel like you are their advocate?
So I think a couple other things is really don't be dismissive of those patients' concerns. Maybe it's something that's not as big of a deal to you, a diagnosis that you think is really not an issue, but for that patient, it's really something that could be serious. For example, post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. It might be insignificant, it might be mild, discoloration, but that patient may be extremely bothered by it.
Absolutely.
So make sure you really understand what it is that they're primarily concerned about. So you're making sure that you're addressing it appropriately. You might be the best clinician on earth and you might have cleared their skin completely of, acne or eczema. But if that hyperpigmentation is remaining, then that might be an issue for them, and they may not think that you're actually qualified to do what you're doing. So
Sure.
I think it's important to know that you're addressing the concerns that the patient came in with in the first place.
That's a great point. So, and to that point, I think a lot of new providers, when we see acne, we want to treat that acne,
Right.
right? But what if the patient's concern isn't the few acne
Right.
bumps that are on their face, but it's all the post-inflammatory
Absolutely.
hyperpigmentation
Absolutely.
that bothers them more than the active
Yeah.
acne?
Yeah.
If you don't address that at that first visit and say, I've got a plan for this, like we're going to get this better, then maybe they don't trust you as
Right.
much,
Right.
right?
Another thing I think is important is that we don't always have the answers, right? So
Right.
we don't know the diagnosis. Oftentimes we utilize our tools, our biopsies, our KOHs. But I think if you don't know, tell the patient that.
Absolutely.
Let them know that, you know what, I'm not sure what's going on here. I think it could be A, B, or C. And really voice your plans to follow through. Make sure that the patient understands that, you know, we're going to do this exam, this test, this swab. I want you to come back in, 4 weeks. We're going to reevaluate. That way, if there is maybe a failure in therapy, maybe they don't get better, at least they trust that you are doing the work, you're putting in the effort to
Yes.
make sure that they get success at some point.
And that builds so much trust, especially if the patient, is very unsure. Just knowing that you have a differential diagnosis, you may not know exactly what this is. And for new providers out there, it's okay to say
Yes,
that you don't know what
absolutely.
it is. Like don't ever feel like you have to know it all on day one out of PA school. Like this is something that we are all continuously learning.
Absolutely.
I've been in practice 23 years and I'm constantly learning new things. And oftentimes we'll learn those things from patients and from patient experiences.
And I think it's always okay to bring in help. I
Absolutely.
work with two really excellent supervising physicians, and I have no reservations about bringing them in to evaluate the patient with me. Oftentimes, the patient feels better about that. They feel
Sure.
like, okay, well, I've got two different opinions now. They both agree on the plan. I
Yes,
think gives them more reassurance. So don't hesitate to do that.
absolutely. So what about the scenarios where there are two patients in the room? And by two patients, I mean the kiddo and the parents, or both parents, or the grandma and both parents, or the entire family has
Yes,
come along.
yes. Mhm.
How do we, with that scary white coat on, make those kiddos feel comfortable?
Right. So for me, again, I really treat them as I often do with adults. I'm going to introduce myself directly to that patient. I don't care if they're 3 years old or, how old they are. I'm going to make
Sure.
sure I give them an introduction. I
Absolutely.
want to know, what's your name? How do you pronounce it? And how old are you?
Mhm.
And oftentimes just that kind of that first little interaction, they really feel like, okay, well, I'm a person here. I'm not
Absolutely.
just looking at mom and asking questions.
Yeah,
The
speak to the patient.
Absolutely. And oftentimes I will ask them, like, what's been going on? You have this, maybe it's a wart on their knee. How long has this bump been there? Does it bother you? Is it itchy? Is it painful? Sometimes they're really shy and they won't give me a
Yes.
response, and
And
that's
they look
okay.
at their mom.
Yes. But I have some kids that are very confident at, ages 6, 7, 8 years old and
Yes.
will give me their full history. So I appreciate that. But I think just really treating them with the same respect that you would an adult patient.
100%.
And still want to be engaging with the parents in the room, obviously.
Of course.
I think it's really, mutual decision making, a shared treatment plan. But ultimately, I still treat that patient with full respect. I don't care what age they are.
For sure. I oftentimes will try to make some kind of a connection with a kiddo, if I see that they're wearing a certain shirt
Yes,
or a
yes,
certain
yes,
sports team, or if they have, Marvel characters.
yes,
I think it's just such a nice way to say, hey, like, buddy, I'm a Gator fan
yes,
too. Like, go
absolutely,
Gators, or whatever that might be.
absolutely, yeah,
Taking that moment, oh, you play football? What position do you play?
yep,
Asking them a little bit about themselves, try to get them out of their shell.
absolutely.
Yeah. So what is one thing, and there are so many things over the course of if you've been in dermatology 15 years, I've
Mhm.
been in dermatology over 20, what can we learn from patients? Like how do we get that moment with them where we can actually be the recipient of the knowledge?
So I think, at least for me, it's that shared decision making, especially nowadays where we're really under more scrutiny as clinicians.
Sure.
I think patients oftentimes are going to go outside of our medical office to find advice. They're going to their social media, they're
Absolutely.
asking family and friends. And so I think it's really important that you're not just directing treatments at them, that you're actually asking them, what do you feel comfortable with? We can start very conservatively with therapy A. We can start as, aggressively as you want. And if you want to knock this out, let's, go on to therapy B. So I think really getting them involved in that treatment plan is really critical. And patients really, they take well to that. They will trust you, but be mindful. Again, this first encounter is really important. Lay that foundation And I promise you there will be growth and success, and not only with that patient, but they will refer everyone that they know to you.
Oh, for sure.
And you'll just continue to grow your practice and develop.
And it has been proven that patients will actually get better clinical outcomes. They will have better success
Absolutely.
with the treatment plan that we put into place if they trust us
Yes,
and if they like us,
Yes.
which is crazy to
Right.
think, because this is certainly not a popularity contest. But if the patient trusts you and if they truly believe that you have their best interest at heart, they're going to follow that shared decision plan that you guys built together.
Yep,
And if they
100%.
feel part of it, if they feel part of that conversation, if we have given them the grace to have the opportunity to be part of their future medical decisions, it's only going to lead to success.
Absolutely.
Very good. So I think we are on the same, we're on the same level there, Bucci.
We are.
Yes,
Absolutely.
I would
So
absolutely
we
agree with
continue to
you.
learn, right? We're veterans in this field, but we continue to learn and grow as we go along.
For sure,
Yeah.
for sure. So whether you've been in practice for 5 minutes or 50 years, take the time to make those connections with your patient, no matter what age, no matter what stage, no matter where they are in their patient journey. And even if they're grouchy, even if they're crying, even if they are, going through all of their feelings, you need to make sure that you are their advocate,
Absolutely.
because that's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for.
Okay, stay tuned for the next episode of the Skin Sync podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Skin Sync. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Spotify so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Send your topic ideas to admin@elevate-derm.com. If your suggestion is featured in a future episode, you'll receive complimentary registration to one of our upcoming conferences. To explore more of Elevate's educational and career resources, visit elevate-derm.com.